And I think I initially did think I had to be that aggressive, domineering type, but I quickly realized that it wasn't working for me. People are actually really good at sensing insincerity. If somebody is being fake, you can tell, right? Even in your personal life. One thing people might not realize based on pop culture is very few cases actually make it to trial.
Namaste. Welcome to the Inspire Series, a podcast hosted by BAPS Better Living. My name is Dhwani, and today I'm joined by our lovely friend, Roma Patel. Roma, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. It's Thanksgiving, and I'm just so excited to be here with you today and just talk a little bit more about your journey in the legal field. So you're a lawyer, you work in digital risk and AI, and that's very fascinating, right? So tell us a little bit about your journey. What brought you to be a lawyer, and how did you get here?
Growing up, my dad always wanted me to be a lawyer because he said I was good at arguing, which I agree. I think I'm pretty good at it. And growing up, I never really gave it much second thought. I actually went to business school, or I went to undergrad at a business school. So my whole college curriculum was like accounting, finance, marketing, comms, everything business based. Um, the natural route for most people after that was an MBA or more business route, and that's what I thought I wanted to do. But along the way, I realized that everything that I was naturally good at and everything that I actually really enjoyed doing, so reading, writing, research, was very like word focused, not numbers focused. And I decided to switch from a more quantitative MBA path to a more qualitative JD path. So I ended up going straight through to law school after undergrad.
So I'm a dentist, and I don't know
Mhm.
much about the legal field. And from my reference to legal field is pop culture. So when I think of a lawyer, I think of someone who's loud, who's aggressive, who's like very assertive in the field. So you know, do you ever feel like do you ever feel pressure to prove like toughness in your field?
I would say asking me today as a fourth year lawyer, not so much. But if you were to ask me as a law student when I first started law school, absolutely. I am the first lawyer in my family. I'm actually the first lawyer. I don't know any other lawyers, so the first lawyer in my immediate community as well. So growing up, my perception of lawyers was the same as yours, pop culture, what we see in TV, movies, what we read in books. Um, and as I mentioned, I went straight through from undergrad. So they call us K through JDs. I was one of the youngest in my cohort. And with that comes a lot of ignorance in the sense of you just don't know what it really means to be a lawyer or a law student. Um, and I think I initially did think I had to be that aggressive, domineering type, but I quickly realized that it wasn't working for me because that's just not who I am as a person. And when I think about the kind of lawyer I want to be, it has to reflect the kind of person that I actually am. My lawyer identity isn't different than my overall, human identity. I get same with you, right? Like
Yeah.
you, as a dentist, there are certain skills as a dentist that you may not bring into your personal life, but you are still the same person. So I realized along the way that it was getting really draining to try to be something that I'm not, try to be like somebody that just doesn't come naturally to me. And I realized quickly that it wasn't worth trying to fit in that way because I could only sustain that for so long. And it sounds so cliche, but I knew I just had to be myself. I mean, and it's good business rationale as an attorney too. Um, Clients trust you. They come to you with their deepest problems and they trust you to solve them. People are actually really good at sensing insincerity. If somebody is being fake, you can tell, right? Even in your personal life. So you don't want to come across that way to anybody. You want your attorney client relationship to be founded on trust and to be founded on authenticity. So that's kind of how I view that now.
I love that you share about authenticity, right? Because whether you're in the legal field or in the health profession, like wherever you are, people can sense if you are not authentic or you are you're not who you say you are, and they can smell that from like a mile away. So the fact that you are authentic, and it comes from the sense of like groundedness, like because you are true to who you are, you're self-aware, and you bring that to the table, right? And people love that because that's how relationships are built, that's how trust is built. And when I think about grounding, I kind of think about humility, right? Because the definition of humility, or at least, when people say humility, people think that they got to be small, like, oh, they got to be when someone says that they want to be humble, they think of them as small, but that doesn't always that's not always the case, right? So tell me a little bit about what you think the definition of humility is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think when we hear the word humble or humility, we think of this making ourselves small or meek in a sense, and it has a bit of a negative connotation to it. But when you think about it, humility, the English word, comes from humilis, the Latin word, and the Latin root for humilis, going even deeper, is humus. Humus translates to groundedness, which is a word we already talked about. So when you think about it, humility is a sense of groundedness in who you are, coming from a self awareness, a self assuredness about who you are and what you stand for. And it's not really about making yourself small. One of my favorite quotes about humility is from C.S. Lewis, and it's that humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. So, it's a lack of ego. It's actively working on thinking of yourself, only yourself less, but it doesn't necessarily mean thinking less of yourself.
I love the etymology you shared because the whole Latin thing comes from the legal field. So I love that you did that. And you said that humility is being grounded, right? So we talked about you being humble or, bring the sense of humility in the professional field, but can you expand on what that means in your personal life?
Yeah, I think it's funny because humility is almost easier in some ways to manifest in our professional lives. I mean, when you think about it, especially in the corporate world, there's pretty set hierarchies, and there are certain things whether through unspoken rules or through written policies, that you can and can't say with your colleagues, and you definitely can and can't say with your bosses, your supervisors. But at home, those lines are much more blurred. There's no set hierarchy. Everyone takes on multiple hats, and for better or for worse, your family sees the most real side of you, whether that's the good and the bad. So at home, I think I have to make more of a conscious effort to remain humble. In my marriage, that looks like making little compromises, right? When you live with another person, then you have to think about what everyone wants for dinner. You have to think about what he wants to do on the weekend. It's not just about you anymore. Even financial decisions, they're a joint decision. It's not just about you anymore. Um, Expanding just beyond a partnership, when you think about seeing your in-laws or living with your in-laws, when you're living in a familial unit, you have to be able to understand everybody. And there's one analogy that I always turn back to. So this is from my guru Yogiji Maharaj, and he said it in Hindi, but I'll kind of translate it in English. So picture a nature scene where you have a lot of tall trees, you have various different plants, and then you have lush green grass. And then imagine that a flood comes through that entire scene. The flood lasts all night. And then you wake up in the morning. What's left? It's typically not the tall, strong trees that are left, it's the grass. And why is that? It's because the grass was small enough to be able to bend, whereas the trees that once stood strong and tall were swept away by the flood. And what that means for me in family life and personal life is being able to bend for others is a strength. It doesn't mean you're lesser than, it doesn't mean that your opinion doesn't matter. It means being flexible and adaptable is the key in having strong, healthy relationships at home. Um, I really enjoy cooking. It's a creative outlet for me. It's something I look forward to every night after having spent whatever, 8 hours looking at a screen. And so cooking is how I bond with my mom and mother-in-law a lot of the times because they also share that same passion. And a lot of times, I'll tell them I made a dish and they'll be like, "Oh, you can try this next time, or you should add this vegetable or this spice." And it's very easy for our generation. And I'll speak for myself. It's very easy for me to sometimes want to roll my eyes or be like, but I already did it. I already know what to do. Like I can ask Chat GPT if I need to.
Yeah,
But
technology,
the
right?
reality, yes, yeah, we have so much information available to us that we sometimes feel that their advice isn't necessary.
Yeah.
But that's not true. And it's not just about, thinking that they're right because they're older and they're automatically right and we're automatically wrong because we're younger. But a lot of my passion from cooking comes from what they've taught me. They've been cooking for decades longer than I have. That's a fact. So there's always something I can learn from them. So being adaptable in that sense, being willing to put your ego to the side to understand what the other person is saying and also why they're saying it. My mother-in-law doesn't have any daughters. My husband is an only child. So the way that she connects with me as a daughter is by talking about the kitchen because it's a shared love that we have. So I have to be willing to be flexible and to understand not only the actual words that she's saying, but the intent behind those.
I love that you shared that because, I'm in the same boat. Like, my husband's also the only child. So we also share with
Yeah.
cooking. Like that's like our passion. And sometimes,
Yeah.
I'll get messages from her, like, they're off in a different country and I get messages from them like, try this, try this, try this. And at first, when they first started, I got overwhelmed. I'm like, oh, like, is she saying that my cooking is bad? Like, what's going on? Like, she keeps
Yeah.
sharing all this with me.
Yeah.
But then I realized, no, like she actually means well. The fact that she looked at a recipe or she looked at an Instagram reel and thought of me and sent me this just means that she was thinking about me and she genuinely felt that, hey, like Dwani can make this, let's do this. So when that mindset for me changed, like our relationship changed completely. So I completely understand, it's almost as if you're putting yourself in, you're seeing it from their perspective and then you realize the intention, where the intention comes from. And then that relationship, that the relationship and the bond you have with them, it just gets stronger and stronger. So I love that you share that.
Yeah, and it's like humility is being when you're grounded in yourself, you don't feel insecure when someone offers you another perspective because you understand that just because there are other perspectives doesn't mean that yours is any less valid. It just means that there's more out there and you're getting like the more holistic picture when you're willing to look at things with humility.
And I love that you shared that about your personal life, right? So in the professional field, like humility, it might have, do you think it looks different? Like, tell me a little bit about how you practice humility in the legal field, because like I said earlier, like this legal field is known to be aggressive and assertive, and there's almost a tough competition that's part of it.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I do data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI law. So a lot of times our clients will come for us for advice. They have their own product, whether it be or a product or a service, and they have their own business model, and they want to know what privacy laws they need to follow, for example. So as a lawyer, yes, you are expected to be an expert in whatever field you're in. And you have to be willing to take on that leadership role of, yes, I am the privacy law expert here. But you also have to stay humble enough to remember, but you're not the business expert. If your client is the CEO of a company that she put her like blood, sweat, and tears into, you don't know the company inside and out. You might know the privacy law, but you don't know the company. So when I'm advising clients, I do advise them on the legal front because that's what they're asking me to do. But at the same time, I have to be willing to listen and learn about their business model, their objectives, because whatever law I'm spewing at them has to meet their goals. And that's also a key part of my job is understanding how what I'm saying fits into the larger picture for them and how to make it work for them. I think lawyers sometimes get a bad rap for being the ones who have to say no to everything. When the business person comes and asks us a question, we're going to be like, well, no, there's XYZ law that says you can't do that. But I want to be the type of lawyer that's, okay, I understand what you want to do. Here are the limitations based on this law, but let's see how we can get around that. So, working collaboratively with clients based on an understanding of what they want and what they need, I think is humility manifesting in the workplace.
I love that you broke down the word humility into two practical things, right? Active listening and learning. And when you're with a client or when you're talking to a friend or your significant other, active listening can actually make that relationship stronger because you're not just listening to listen, you're actually listening to give them feedback, or you're listening to make the other person feel heard or understood. And like you said, like that's how you form trust in relationship, whether it's in your professional or personal life, right? So um that to me, it almost sounds like you're talking about humility with a little bit of a depth to it. And the word that comes to mind is intellectual humility. So, and I'm sure that plays a little bit more of a role in your work field. So tell me a little bit about how intellectual humility influences you as a lawyer.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that because when we think of humility, we think of the stereotypical personality trait of being humble that we've been discussing so far. But intellectual humility is a type of humility that's super powerful in my work, especially, and it has been to me. So, intellectual humility basically means the ability to see your own shortcomings and to basically accept that you're wrong. You can be wrong. And that's really important, especially in the litigation field, because when you think about it, every trial is each side presenting their own version of the truth, and then the jury or the judge, whoever is the decision maker at the end, decides what they believe is the actual truth. So one thing people might not realize based on pop culture is very few cases actually make it to trial. So if you have a case that made it to trial, that probably means that each side has at least some merit to have been able to make it that far. So if you show up at trial and you have not even thought about the other side's arguments or what could be in their favor, you have done your client a huge disservice by not considering your own side's shortcomings. And cases are based on real facts, right? There are going to be some facts that are good for you and some facts that are not. And that's the whole beauty of trial, is you working with that and how you convince the decision maker that your side is the truth. So earlier this summer, my firm held a mock trial for all the litigation junior associates. So I was part of that, and we had a mock case. So we had a hypothetical scenario. Everyone was broken into teams, and we had to put up a real trial. So the case was about a company whose building burnt down, and they were looking for insurance proceeds. Anyways, my side represented the company who was looking for the insurance payout. And the best thing that I did to prep for that trial was to actually put myself in the shoes of the insurance company's counsel and outline what their argument would be. I not only practiced my own arguments at trial, but I literally drafted an outline and out loud practiced what exactly I would say as the other side. And what that helped me do was understand the weaknesses in our side. When you're so involved and laser focused on your case, it's really easy to think, oh, all these facts are in our favor. But then when you flip it on its head and do the other thing, the look at it from the other side's perspective, you realize that they also have facts in their favor. And the team that wins typically is the team that has anticipated what the other side's strengths are so that they can rebut them in a way that convinces the jury. And that's exactly what I tried to do. And I'm happy to say that my team did win the mock trial. So we were able to convince the jury in our case. And again, it was all teamwork. So I'm not saying it was just me, but I think a huge part of why I felt so confident being up on the stand was because I could anticipate what the other side was going to say, and I already knew what I had to say in response. Had I not had the intellectual humility to take that exercise in the trial prep, I would have done my client a disservice.
I love that you shared that, and I'm glad you guys won the mock trial because that sounds pretty
Yeah.
that sounds pretty intimidating, right? So, you spoke a lot about humility and this value that you bring into your professional life. So, I'm sure that's something, it's not a value that just pops up in someone's life, right? So, like, who are some of the people that you most look up to, and like, what have they taught you about humility?
I think not necessarily lawyers only, but I look up to people in my life who have this sense of silent strength or gentle fortitude. So, what the first example that pops in my head is my guru Mahant Swami Maharaj. He is the epitome to me of embodying this gentle humility in all aspects of his life. And there's one incident that I really like and think about often. So, this was around 25 years ago. Mahant Swami at the time was a senior sadhu, but he wasn't yet the guru, the spiritual leader of our organization. But he was still a respected senior sadhu. So he had prepared a presentation for a group of youth who were traveling to India from America on a spiritual trip for a few weeks. And so, acknowledging that they probably may have had a bit of a language barrier because his presentation was mainly in Gujarati, he decided to amplify his presentation with around 30 illustrations. So, Mansami has always been a creative artist, so he had hand drawn these illustrations to go along with his presentation in hopes that it would be more engaging and fun for the youth. Unfortunately, the youth, as I said, had traveled from America, so they were tired by the time they got there. They were probably going through a bit of jet lag, and during Mahant Swami's presentation, they fell asleep. So Mahant Swami realized that, continued his presentation, didn't say anything. Not only that, later that same evening, he handwrote an apology letter to the youth. Now, he is decades older than them, right? And he is in the position of respect, but he came down to their level, saw things from their perspective. He apologized that his presentation was not entertaining enough. Not only that, he went so far as to say, I noticed you were sitting cross legged during the presentation. And you're probably not used to that because you're used to sitting in chairs. So that added to your discomfort. I am really sorry for this poor experience that you had. And when I put myself in his shoes, if I had spent hours prepping a presentation, adding memes to it, and making sure that Gen Z of today's time would be engaged in it, and if they fell asleep during my presentation, I would not be the one saying sorry. I would probably be sitting there waiting for them to say sorry to me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But Mahant Swami, it goes back to active listening and willing to learn. He listened not only to what they were saying, but he listened to their body language. He listened to the entire context of what was happening. And he said, I will try to do better next time. That to me embodies humility in such a powerful way.
Thank you so much for sharing, your wisdom about humility and what it means to practice it in everyday life, right? Not just as a lawyer, but at home too, as a person, at home too, right, in your personal life. So we're gonna do a little bit of a lightning round. So are you ready for that?
I think so.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So what's one book that you're reading right now?
One book that I recently finished that's still on my mind, it's called 168 Hours. You Have More Time Than You Think by Laura Vanderkam. And I recommend that book and all of her books to anyone who's interested in time management, productivity, work-life balance. I just thought it was an incredible book.
So I'm assuming that, you're on video calls a lot, right? Because of the hybrid work environment. So what is like the silliest thing you've ever done in a Zoom meeting?
So nothing as bad as that lawyer that showed up to Zoom court as a cat, and then the poor man couldn't figure out how to
I remember
change
that.
it. But
I remember
in
that.
my head, this it was so bad. But in my head, what I've done is equally as bad. I was on a Zoom call with a client, and there were only 4 or 5 of us, so we were all on the same screen. It's not like I could have been hiding on someone's second screen. I'm sure everyone could see me. And I was messing with my Zoom settings. I think I was trying to change the lighting or background or something, and I accidentally clicked that little arrow, which, if you didn't know, means it rotates your screen. So
I
I
didn't know
ended up
that.
turning myself, now you know, now I know. I ended up turning myself upside down, and I'm sitting there like fumbling, scrambling, trying to fix it because the client is talking, like, this is a real client meeting. And then I just couldn't figure out how to do it. So I ended up like struggling for 2 minutes and then just leaving the meeting and coming back. No one said anything, but I'm pretty sure everyone saw. So sometimes I still think about that and cringe a little.
Oh my gosh, hey, that's you practicing humility in real time. So that there you go.
Yeah.
It's okay. We've all had our like fair share of, embarrassing Zoom calls. So thank you so much for being vulnerable and telling us a little bit about that. So Roma, thanks again for joining us here today. And to all our listeners and viewers, Roma just shared her story about how humility, it's not shrinking, right? It's not about making yourself small. It's actually about staying grounded and rooted to the earth and knowing who you are, right? And you're strong enough to bend without breaking. And like her story, it's like a reminder that in every field, even in competitive areas like law or healthcare, authenticity and active listening, it creates really deep impact. So I'm going to leave you with one reflection. How can you practice humility in your life? How can you become a better listener, an active listener, and foster really good, strong relationships with others? Thank you so much for joining us today. Namaste. Bye.
Bye.